Hey there guys, welcome back, Ricky here. Alright, so a lot of you guys have been asking about my long-term testing of my DIY plates. Now if you guys watched my channel, I think like a year ago, I made my DIY sharpening plates versus a set of whetstones. I think it was a Shapton glass set of whetstones, and the results were pretty comparable. The DIY plates cost me, I think, about 70 bucks all in. Basically, having a custom aluminum plates cut out, and then purchasing a set of 3M's PSA bagged lapping film. With PSA bagged, you can transfer them from glass to carbon fiber to steel or to aluminum plates, and they will transfer from each one of those substrates pretty easily. So I definitely recommend PSA bagged paper if you're gonna buy these and make your own set of plates. You can buy these in a variety of microns and grit levels. What I have here is the 15 micron, the 5 micron, the 1 micron, and the 0.3 or 1/3 micron. And so in terms of grit level, they translate to about, I want to say these are 1500 grit for the 15 micron, and for the 5 micron, I believe it's the 4500 grit level. The 1 micron equates to about 14,000 grit, and the 0.3 micron translates to about 80,000 grit. Now with the 8x11 sheet, I was able to make 3 full-size covers for my carbon fiber plates, which are measuring 10 by 2.5. Now, if I flipped them and I was willing to leave maybe a ½ inch on each side of the top and bottom sides of the plates, I can get 4 sheets per whole sheet. That will make your money go the longest. The other thing that people ask about is what is the best substrate to put them on? Now, you can definitely go to your local hardware store, and I have found 1 square foot plexiglass sheets for about $5, and you can actually get about 4 sheets of 4 individual 3 by 12 sheets. And that actually works really well for $5. Now with me, with my own strops, I decided to use my carbon fiber plates. These are like Gen 3. So I first started with aluminum plates, and they were great, but they were a little bit on the pricey side, and they were a little bit soft. They would scratch really easily. And then I tried tempered glass, which were like really beautiful, but they were very fragile. You can't drop tempered glass. Even though they are tempered glass, they still will break when you drop them. Then I went to acrylic glass. My newest set of toys that I've made are carbon fiber plates, which I use for my strops. And I love them because they're super flat and they are really stiff. These are only 4 millimeters thick, but they don't bend at all. And so I decided to upgrade all my current strops to carbon fiber plates, and so I'll be doing some giveaways, some of my older strops if you guys are interested. So in terms of how I made these, it was actually really simple. I took the sheets of film, I laid them down, and then I put the carbon plates on them and I simply cut around it. Now because these plates have a chamfer, I actually made sure that the paper were actually about 1 or 2 millimeters shorter on every side than the actual plate, so that way they fit on top and the center of the plate really nice and tight. So after all the sheets were applied on the plates, I simply put legs on them. The really great thing about these silicone legs is that they add about 8 millimeters of height to the plates, and they are very grippy. So then I did a full-on sharpening and polishing session. I first sharpened on the 15 micron sheet, which is about 1500 grit. In terms of lubrication, you can use water or honing oil. I have found that honing oil does a little bit better job at trapping the debris that comes off of the knife. And so it's up to you though. You can definitely use water or honing oil. Now there are a couple of things that I want to point out in terms of how the paper felt when I was sharpening. The burr development was actually very consistent and fairly fast for a 1500 grit. The other good thing is that because it is so flat and there's no give on the paper, you really feel everything. You have essentially no excuses as to what you can and cannot feel on the knife. The feedback is immediate, and so that's a good thing for some people. Some people it's not so good because it is so immediate and it's very unforgiving. These are a little bit tougher to use than whetstones, at least in my personal opinion. But if you're used to sharpening, hopping on 3M paper is not going to be that much difficult, or that much more difficult than sharpening on a whetstone. So after the 15 micron, I went to the 5 micron, which is about 4500 grit, and that was actually very easy to do. I simply stropped at that point, and then once I go above my 1000 grit, I typically just like to go 1 stroke per side. These are super flat, and so every little change in pitch of angles that you do on your wrist really felt on the blade and almost exaggerated. So after about a dozen pulls on each side, I went to the 1 micron, which is the 14,000 grit level. Now this 14,000 grit paper I had left over from another project, so I didn't have the full length sheet with me, and so I had to make 3 smaller, these are about 8 inches or so, which works fine. I just have a little bit of gap from the top and the bottom of the plate. So I simply went to work on the 14,000 grit or the 1 micron sheet. and it felt really nice. It didn't take off nearly as much materials as the 4500 grit or the 5 micron paper did. I'm happy to report that even though I used honing oil for all 4 of these sheets, I didn't feel like they slipped much, except on the 80,000 grit. First of all, I need to say you don't need an 80,000 grit polishing finishing, okay? So it's definitely overkill. For those who are curious about why you would get an 80,000 grit paper, I think it's more for shaving razors, and so it would make more sense that way. If you are sharpening a knife, 14,000 grit, I would say would be your max. You don't need to go anything higher than that. If you do, it's just for kicks and it's not for performance, at least in my very humble opinion. Just to make it clear, these are not better than whetstones. They are just different. They cost less and they don't last as long. But in terms of actual results and performance, they will give you very equivalent performances and results that you would find on a high-end set of Japanese whetstones. I guess the question is, are these something I'd recommend for people? In all honesty, I would say yes for stropping, no for sharpening, and here is why. I think that if you want to buy a sharpening stone, you can definitely just buy one for 10 bucks or 20 bucks. And then instead of buying a 5,000 grit whetstone or 6,000 grit whetstone for between 50 to 100 to $200, you can spend, 20 bucks and buy yourself a set of the 3M sheets. And so for me, the best combination would be buying a low-end whetstone, something like, something that costs under 20 bucks, and then buying these plates here with these sheets, and you can kind of have some fun that way. These 4 sheets cost me 20 bucks to invest in, and then each whole sheet was able to be subdivided into 3 individual sheets. And so to me, that was actually worth the investment. So let's just make it really clear. These are fun to use. They should not replace your whetstones altogether. Sharpening dull knives, they're fine. Polishing a finely sharpened knife, they're perfect for that. But in terms of repair, you definitely still need a whetstone or a grinding stone of some sort. And so that's why I say that if you want to replace any sort of whetstones, replace your higher end grit whetstones with these sheets, not your lower end whetstones. A good whetstone is still very essential. They're good for sharpening dull knives, not damaged knives, because damaged knives will definitely cut them up. On the higher grit side, if you guys are just getting into sharpening, they are definitely worth looking at because you don't have to invest a lot of money in a polishing whetstone. You can polish on these. They will give you very similar results as a whetstone would in terms of raw performance and raw finishes. And because they can stack, they don't take up a lot of room on my workbench, which I am running out of space due to all the stones and knives I have already. So to me, real estate is very valuable at this point. In terms of actual performance, I know you guys are probably curious, how do these perform in real life? Well, anything between a 100 and 200 is considered utility sharpness or razor sharpness, and anything between 200 and 300 is considered high-end Japanese knife sharpness. And so the sharpness that I got today on my Matsumoto KS was between the 150 to 200, low 200s. So I was very happy with those results, considering that these sheets only cost you, like I said, $5 or $6 a piece on the Edge On Up PT50A. And for those who don't know what that is, it's basically just a device that measures the amount of weight or amount of force required to cut a filament on top of a scale. And so the lower the number, the sharper the knife. So if you are getting into sharpening and you want to try out lapping film, I would say stick with a whetstone if you already have one, or if you want to buy a cheap whetstone, get the cheap whetstone, and then pick up the 5 micron and the 1 micron sheet. I think these two sheets, in terms of overall purpose, they make the most sense because the 4500 grit or the 5 micron sheet gives you, medium polish, and then you have your 14,000 grit or 1 micron, which gives you mirror polish. And then your sharpening will be done on your cheap or medium grade whetstone, whatever you use. So I think the combination of a whetstone plus the 5 micron and 1 micron sheet makes the most sense. But again, that's just my very humble opinion. And I have found that on the 40 and 15 micron sheets, they last about, I would say, between 10 to 12 sharpenings with knives I've sharpened them with knives ranging from 55 Rockwell up to 62, and so your mileage may vary, but I have found that from the 4500 and up to the 60,000 or 80,000 grit sheets, I have found that you can definitely use them over a dozen times. So one whole 8x11 sheet will last you probably about a year or so, which is not bad considering the investment is about $5 to $6 per sheet. That will be it for this video. Thank you for being here, and I will leave links in the video description to where you can find these plates and the lapping film. All right, I'll catch you in the next one.